Ni hao, 我的名字是 Jaden, and welcome to the Marty and Jaden Show. Of course, this time we're talking about The Three Body Problem by Liu Cixin.
That was pretty impressive. Where the heck did you learn how to do that?
That is the only phrase in Chinese that I know. And I had to pull it out because this is the only opportunity that I'm going to have.
Well, that's awesome. Well, we really enjoyed this book. We're very excited about it. Netflix is making their own series about it. There has been another series already made before this. I think.
Really?
Yeah, there was. There's a three-body problem. I think it was actually made in China or by like a Chinese director.
Is it a movie or a series like the new one?
Series. And I think it also might be on Netflix as well. But like this is more like the Americanized like Netflix version of it. So very interesting.
I have heard some whispers and rumors on the series that might make it into this podcast too. But the general concept that we want to talk about today is the book itself. We want to review the book, let people know if they should read that book now that Netflix has come out with a series. Is it even worth reading? Answer those important questions in today's podcast.
Yeah. So first we'll give you the quick idea of what the book is. Whenever I'm talking to someone if they should read this book or not, I give them like a quick what the back of the book says.
Okay.
And this feels to me like it's a big spoiler, but I don't think it is because the book says that like on the back of the book, like if you read the back of the book, you're going to find out this information. But the book says that this is a story about, it's an alien book.
Yep.
It's a book about...
But you can't start with that.
No,
you told me that the first time too.
I know.
It really threw me off.
Well, let me finish my thing and then tell me what you would say. It's an alien book, but it's more about... It's probably the most realistic take that I have ever heard or read or like heard told in a story of what would happen if we had contact with aliens. How would the world react? And the book is split, and this is what the back of the book says. Like there are two factions. There's one faction that says, let this happen. We need the aliens to come. Our world is horrible. They would probably do a better job than us anyways. And then there's another faction that says, this is absolutely cannot happen. We need to prevent this from happening, which is pretty cool in our political landscape today. You feel like everyone's very polarized on extreme positions anyways. And so it's just neat. Like that's why I was excited initially to read this book. I'm like, wow, this sounds really interesting.
It is an exciting book, but I will say there was one thing when you described it to me the first time.
Like that.
When you said it's an alien book. And I want to clarify for the audience and everyone who's going to watch this video. The book is not an alien book. It's a book about society that makes first contact with aliens, never meets an alien in the whole book.
Hey, that's a big spoiler.
It's very important. It's important for you to realize that it's not like Alien versus Predator.
Yeah,
it's a very different, it's more philosophical.
Would you have wanted me to have told you that in the beginning of the book?
I would have, I think I've intentionally said that it's not about like an invasion of aliens like all the other alien books are.
Yeah.
I mean, the concepts are there, like the concept of alien contact, and they're like, what do we do? Do we invite them? Do they not? Obviously, that's super important. Like you mentioned, that's on the back of the book. People are trying to decide.
Of course.
But I do think it's important to realize that it's not Alien versus Predator. It's not like those where we're being. It's not what is it? Not Day After Tomorrow. What's it called? The one with Will Smith.
Yeah, Independence Day.
Yeah, there we go. So it's not that. It's a very different book than that.
Day After Tomorrow's that climate change one.
Yeah,
but there's another one that's called like it's called the Tomorrow War or something like that.
No, it's not that one either. That's different. That's time travel.
No, the one with Tom Cruise in it. And
that's not the Tomorrow War.
What's that one called?
That one's called. Oh man, now you're gonna. It's not the Tomorrow War, but it is
the Edge of Tomorrow.
Edge of Tomorrow.
Oh, all these Tomorrow movies.
They need to not name these things so confusing.
I know.
But yeah, that's a good one.
They're
too,
all
actually.
the same movie.
I kind of like that one.
I'm just kidding.
That's a great plane movie.
A plane movie?
Yeah, to watch on the plane where you're like, I'm not gonna go to this movie.
Okay, yeah.
But if I had to kill 2.5 hours, there's enough going on in that movie.
That is a good. I actually like that movie. It was pretty good. It's your classic like jump back in time 100 times like story. Like they do those all the time. Like, yeah, classic. Like Next is another movie that does that a lot. It was really good. It's with one of the Nicolas Cage movies.
Oh
yeah.
I saw that once.
He's only 2 minutes into the future. I love that movie. I thought it was great.
Yeah. Sometimes Nicolas Cage, sometimes I just can't.
You know what? He plays a certain character in some movies. He's perfect.
Very specific. Anyway,
yeah,
we're bringing it back.
Bring it back. So this book, totally would recommend someone to listen to.
Yes.
So we both listened to the book. Mm-hmm. This is very well done. This book, without giving in spoilers, the review of it, it's a very good book for philosophical questions, like you
intellectual questions. Yeah, absolutely.
Intellectual questions. It's just very sciencey and very. I felt like by the end of this book, my mind was just like opened to like a whole like another world of science.
It's like fun physics.
And physics.
Physics is fun in general. Everybody knows that. But this is just an element of making that into a sci-fi novel, which is pretty fun.
Yes.
Even more fun than normal physics.
And clearly, a lot of these like physics are fictionalized, and like not all of it is real. But it totally opens up your mind to the possibilities of science. It made me want to go like, wow, I gotta go learn some more about science.
It revolves itself around concepts that are actual physics concepts. Which
for sure.
That's why it's so interesting.
Yeah,
because you're like. It's almost as if, what if these advances that people are kind of whispering and talking about actually happened, and this is the way that they kind of happened? So you're like, okay, that's not really real yet, but it's an interesting adaptation of what might happen.
Yeah. I heard somebody explain this in a really good way. Maybe it was you. I heard that it does a good job at taking a story from almost a newspaper perspective. Like it's such like a high view that like, yes, you're getting characters and everything, but you're kind of like getting it as if you're reading a news story about like what's going on.
And that's actually an interesting take, and I don't think it was me.
Yeah.
Unless I had a moment of clarity. Yeah. But I like the take because I remember before this, we were like remembering the whole story and somehow just like missing characters.
Yeah.
It was so weird. Like you just don't have a concept of like the individual characters in their story, but you know the whole story.
Yeah.
And that is a good way to explain it. Like it's almost like reading a newspaper article. Like you don't remember the people's names really well.
Yeah.
You remember what happened.
Yeah. Like this event happened. These people reacted this way. Wasn't that so crazy? And all those things.
And it was so crazy. Overall, the book's crazy. Yeah. Especially when you get to the end. It's just like, whoa. It's one of those books that I would say you have to stick through it. Even if you start to like, oh, there's a little too much physics in here for me. You got to stick through. Yeah. It's so cool.
Good payoff to the end. It just blows your mind. It was a very, very fun book. It was a very fun switch from like, we've done a lot of fantasy. Jumping into a sci-fi book it's just great. I really love that. So, but now we're going to jump into more spoilery talk of the book.
And kind of go through the book as its normal book timeline. Yeah. That means we're going to give away some things along the way.
Okay, yeah. So what were your initial thoughts when you were starting to read this book, and what were you thinking?
It was first, I must say I was waiting for aliens to show up. So I was very confused.
Just kidding.
It was cool because they started in a very like eerie way. Like they have the countdown, they have the research, they have the someone's murdered like right at the beginning.
But
her dad is killed because they're like intentionally saying no one can have any thoughts outside of the standard socialized, like this is the political structure. No one can have any ideas outside of
the Red Revolution, right? Yep. With how communism started in China. And this was so weird for me to read this book and like try to figure out what was going on, because you never hear like usually, because we live in America, right? And we have capitalism and like freedom of thought, but you never hear it like reversed on itself and them taking a perspective of communism and like thought like I don't even know how to describe it. Like you don't have freedom of thought.
So anti-freedom of thought. We're basically saying the educational system failed us, and we only learned about America.
No. What I'm saying though is like you're looking at it from like a communism perspective on if it were like their perspective as an extremely good thing, and they're using very positive words for like we hate science, we hate learning, and like all these extra things. And
like, that person's a revolutionary. Oh, that's a terrible person.
Like those are words that you use for people who are freedom, like freedom of thought, and like not like I wouldn't even say good or bad, but like more just like freedom of thought. Okay. Those are words associated with freedom. Revolution is associated with freedom, and it's not associated with like we need the government to have more control over our lives. Let's have a revolution. You know,
that's true.
That's why this was so confusing for me to read at the beginning. But it was also, I think it was meant to be read that way because the author is showing like the dangers of like, it almost feels like a modern day 1986, like 84. Oh, kill me in the comments.
No, you got it. You were right there.
In 1984. But that's what George it felt Orwell, like to me. Yeah. Like you're seeing all these people coming together and saying we need to shut down this thought. Like those are dangerous thoughts. Those are dangerous things to do. And it creates this woman who goes off and believes that the world is evil and bad because of these experiences that she was raised in a world that was so anti-freedom and so hateful of like her like people who believed in what they wanted to believe in.
And a great way to set up the premise of the book, because you think about the dichotomy of like, do we let the aliens come and take over because they'll do better, or are we confident in ourselves and do we need to fight them? Those are very contradictory opinions and thoughts. So it's a great way to set up the book in saying, how do we deal with contradiction in our lives, in our world, in our politics, in our communities? All of that stuff is something that they don't have a great experience with because of whether it's communism, whether it's the propaganda, all this stuff. So they don't have that experience. So making this decision becomes even harder for them. And they don't have a great frame of reference to say, hey, you know what? We should really talk this out, or we should really have, a conversation, and we should bring both sides together, because this doesn't happen. Yep. One side is evil and one side is good, and the two sides think the same thing about each other. Yep. So it's a very interesting way to set up that's going to continue through the entire book.
Oh, very fascinating. And this kind of jumps ahead with it, but like our main character here, she, like, from these experiences, that's what leads her to say, like, we just need to be eliminated by aliens. Like, whoever comes in here just needs to ruin this planet, because or not ruin the planet, but get rid of the people, because we are so evil. And that was from
she's
her
a little bit evil on her own.
She is
pretty brutal.
Her thought process has become jaded by that whole experience. Yep. It's just, I feel like I was interrupting what you were going to say about that. But
I was literally going to say the same thing. She saw I think it was her father, brutally murdered.
Yep.
And then for having an alternate opinion. Yep. So now she's like, well, clearly the entire race is just gone.
Yeah. And it wasn't even just an opinion. It was something that had been studied through science.
Yeah.
Like, these are like theories. And of course, like all theories can be like, that's the whole idea of science. Like, this kills me when people say like, well, this is a fact in science. I'm like, nothing is a fact in science. Like, that is the point of science. Like, you can argue anything. You could argue that gravity isn't real, and real scientists would be okay with you arguing that, but they would also have to say, like, you have to be okay with me calling like your argument dumb with my own like facts and stuff like that.
But the fact that you're bringing this is, I think, one of the reasons why the book is so good in today's world.
Yeah.
Because it's an element of, there can never be an evil question. Questions should always be possible, and people should always be seeking after learning and education and intelligence in asking good questions, backed up by data and science. And you're welcome to argue the facts, and you're welcome to argue one way or another and try and learn more. Obviously, it doesn't need to become personal attacks. I don't know why that always happens. But there should always be a healthy debate of opinion and ideas and thoughts, and that's how we learn things. Think about Copernicus and like all these things that happen through history. You'd think we'd learn and say, maybe the dogma that everyone believes about everything revolving around the earth, that happened. And then one guy was like, actually, that's not true because of all these things that I've learned. And they ended up like killing him. So it's like, why do you need to continue that pattern over and over again? And this book, I think, does a great job of explaining we need to be able to question and think and learn as a society, as a community.
Yep.
And that learning as a humanity is something that is severely stifled in the book.
Yes. And kind of going with that too, and like this is what I was trying to say earlier as well, is just that it's okay. People should be encouraged to ask the dumb questions too, and make the dumb statements. Say, the world is flat. No, it is not, but we can prove it to you by saying, like, here's an example. You stand on the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere, and the moon is upside down or right side up, like in different locations. You can see things. And these are like examples that we can give to people who have these like dumb questions. But that's the cool thing about freedom of thought, is that everyone is able to bring in their thoughts. And so the dumb facts that get brought out are stifled because there are so many good thoughts and good logic and good evidence that come up to just come to a true answer. You're able to get to truth.
Absolutely.
Which is so cool.
There are people out there that think the new Netflix adaptation of Avatar was good.
Yeah, they would be wrong.
They're welcome to have those opinions, but I can bring facts and tell you this is just not good.
True. And you could come to a collective consensus from people, or just actually, I wouldn't even say a collective consensus. I would say you come with a
harmony, collective
coliseum of ideas.
Coliseum, the gladiatorial combat of ideas.
Yes, that all come together till one idea is left standing.
Wow.
Yes. I think it's amazing. I love freedom of thought, man. I think it's a good thing.
So if you learn anything from this book, freedom of thought,
yeah,
big thumbs up. So a lot of the interesting nuances to this book are that it takes some interesting twists and turns across the realm of fantasy, let's say.
Yeah.
In the sense of there's a game. I think it's my favorite part of the book, so I want to skip right to it.
Oh yeah, go for it.
There's a game called The Three Body Problem, and that's the same title as the book. But essentially, it's a game that humans on Earth play that was, I think, either sent to Earth or somehow transferred. But basically, the premise of the game is that they live in a society where you never know what's going to happen each day. We live in a society where every morning the sun rises in the east, and it's all normal. Everything is a continuous rotation. But in this world, in the game, there's just chaos completely. There's
chaotic era.
There's an era of chaos, and there's a stable era, I think.
They literally call it a chaotic era and a stable era. Which
so
there's a reason
the sun rises, and sometimes the sun just won't rise. And sometimes the sun will rise with blaring heat and melt everything in its path, and sometimes it'll just be a normal day.
Yep. And sometimes the sun will be so far away that it freezes everything.
Yep. So there's no warmth on the planet. So you just never know what's going to happen, and they're trying to survive in this society, and they have cool little adaptations for that. Like they can dehydrate their bodies and survive through like the cold and the heat, and then rehydrate themselves. It's pretty wild. Kind of a cool concept. If you listen to the book, you will enjoy the rehydrate situation.
Yeah, it's great. It's really great. And then they go on and they're just trying to solve this problem of like why this is going on.
Oh, so the player's job is to like fix it.
Yep.
Like you're almost coming in as, I think, a science advisor or something.
Yeah.
Where you have to talk to the leader and you have to convince them that you know when the next stable era will be and how long it will be.
Yep.
So as a scientist, you're trying to make calculations or whatever to try and say the next stable era will start in 4 days and it will last 2 years.
That way they can dehydrate during the chaotic eras and still survive.
Because every time they have to dehydrate and rehydrate, if they aren't able to retain their society, to start back over from zero. And if the stable era isn't long enough, they'll get to like the Stone Age, or they'll get to like rudimentary science, or they want to be able to progress as far as possible. So knowing these things allows them to continue progressing. Yeah. They even get to a point where they make an entire computer out of people with flags.
This was Jaden's favorite part.
It was my favorite part of the whole book. They had RAM.
As a software engineer.
It was fantastic. I loved it.
Yeah. Well, tell me about it. Because as a software engineer, like the RAM and everything, like what was just the best? Like,
how long do we have?
Yeah.
The thing that I thought was cool is that they really use some of the basic concepts of computer science. Everything at the end of the day is on or off, a 1 or a 0. Yeah. Let's ignore quantum computing for a moment.
Yeah.
But it's the concept that the flag is up or the flag is down.
We don't use quantum computing in our normal laptops or anything, though, right?
No. We're not there
So
yet.
it's like a normal computer, right?
We're getting there, but people might be thinking about anyway.
Yeah.
Being a 0 and a 1 at the same time. But it's a 0 or a 1.
Yeah.
And the concept is that it's either on or off, which tells you in a circuit, I can show you the number 4 just using 1s and 0s in binaries, what they call it. Yep. So you can say how long a bit is, to make a letter, to make a word, to make a sentence, to run a program, do lots of things.
Yeah.
And they did the same thing with people with flags.
Yeah.
When the computer broke because people weren't doing their jobs, you just went in and killed all those people and replaced them. It was a brutal time. Okay, it was almost a chaotic era, but it was just cool to see that they're like, okay, how do we determine these stable eras and chaotic eras? The best way is to do some computing, run these calculations. The only way to run these calculations is with a computer. We don't have a computer, but we have lots of people. Like, it was just wild. They even had like long-term memory storage of people writing stuff down. It was crazy.
Dude, I love that.
It's probably one of my favorite parts.
Well, I've got to ask you, because my wife just finished reading the book.
Yeah.
And one of the first things she said about that part, she's like, that you couldn't really do that, could you?
Could, yeah.
And I want to hear your thoughts on that.
You could. You absolutely could. There are people who have built working computers in Minecraft using just blocks.
No way.
Called redstone. They just have an on or an off switch.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely, you could. Think about, have you ever seen the movie The Turing Problem, or The Turing Game?
Oh.
It's about the Enigma machine.
No, that one's called the
Is it not called that?
Imitation Game?
The Imitation Game.
Yeah.
Anyway. But yeah, so he builds a basic computer. Like, the concept of a computer is just a faster way to make these calculations, to run these systems through a circuit in different ways, all at the same time.
To turn switches on and off.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
To just run through a circuit to say, like, this will work this way, and then if this is this. So the way they organized it, you have to think about, like, all of these calculations have to happen. So you're like, okay, we have to make sure all of this is on or off, and there's, like, bitwise things. But basically, it's a 1 or a 0. So if you have a set of 6, then you're like, okay, if any of these are 1, then this other person is going to raise his flag. And then you can do thousands of these that all can condense to is it true or false.
Yeah.
So you can do a lot of different interesting things.
Wow.
But yeah, so technically it would be possible. It'd be a very basic computing machine, but yeah.
Dang. I think I told that to Malia too. I'm like, no, it's got to be real because Jaden was really excited about it. So
I loved it. I thought it was cool. It's not like there's a slight difference, right? A computing machine versus like a computer you would expect. Like it's not going to have a display.
Yeah.
it's going to be a little bit more nuanced than that. It's really just to make a calculation.
Yeah.
But yeah, you could totally do it.
I mean, they're trying to calculate where the suns are going to be.
Just trying to run a calculation.
Yeah. Very, very cool. So that's neat. So when I finished this book, I had to look on YouTube and watch the video on the whole 3-body problem and see what it was like if it was an actual science problem. Did you ever watch a video like that? I'll have to show it to you.
I looked up the problem, but I didn't see a video on it.
Oh yeah, it's a super good video. And actually, I found this is actually a real thing where they cannot calculate where if there are more than 3 or more bodies in a solar system, they cannot calculate where it's going to be. But they can do it in our solar system because everything's in like a constant position, which is actually a miracle that it's the way that it is. Because if they were talking about even if you moved Mercury a centimeter closer to the sun, then it would throw everything off in the universe to the point where the Earth could plunge into the sun. Like with it just crazy. Like
some might say it was designed that way.
Pretty cool. Pretty cool. Yeah. And then with that too, making a connection to the book, I was really impressed on why they call it a stable era and a chaotic era, because they call those types of systems a stable system or a chaotic system.
That's cool.
Yeah. So there's lots of science just throughout the whole
like
book.
that they chose that as the premise of the book because it's so easy for the mind to comprehend. 1 thing spinning makes sense. 2 things spinning makes sense. 3 things completely chaos.
Yep.
It just helps your mind to say, there's science there that we just don't understand, or there's math there that we're just not capable of.
Yeah, more the math that we don't understand.
Yeah,
it's the gravity
it's the
we
math.
understand it, but there's so many variables.
We can't figure it out because there's so many variables. There's just no way to track it coherently, and it's easy to say it's just beyond our grasp. It's there. It's so obvious. It's just one more step, one more dimension, and we just can't figure it out. So it's cool because even someone who's not versed in that problem can say, yeah, we're just not there yet.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I love that all about the book. I want to mention some of the characters of this book that I really liked, like Da She. I think that's how you say his name, Da She.
The general.
He's not a general. He's the police officer.
Yes. Okay.
He's a police officer that is really street
smart. He asked all the questions. Yeah.
He's hilarious, but also really smart in the book. I love like his just like influence in the book. My favorite too is like when you realize that he's just a genius in any situation. Is at the end when they're like cutting that boat into several pieces.
It was great. It's like so awesome.
I know. It's like his idea. He's like, well, we got to do it during the day. Like, so if they're
everyone's standing up,
make sure everyone's standing up. So they're using nanofibers to cut through stuff.
And people.
That's not a thing yet, is it? Like using sharp nanofibers to cut things?
Not that I've ever heard of, but I'm not a scientist.
But I was talking to my wife about this.
And she is a scientist.
She was talking about that there are nanofibers, though. That's like a real thing. Like they have nanofibers. I'm like, do they make them sharp? She's like, I don't know. She's like, I have to look it up. But if
they exist, they've been weaponized. So
can you imagine just like walking through an invisible like razor wire that just
terrifying? That
is terrifying.
I don't like that at all. But the thing about it has to be strong enough. I know we have nanofibers or like carbon nanotubes that exist.
I think
that's like one single strand of carbon.
Isn't that the idea that they're still super strong
enough? Not to cut through somebody.
I don't know.
It'd be pretty strong.
I hope not.
I guess we'll find out in Netflix's adaptation.
Oh my gosh.
They probably aren't using real nanoparticles.
Hope not.
It might just be CGI.
It might be. Yeah, that part of the book was one of the most shocking parts of the book.
I loved how they were thinking about like, oh, it would just destroy the drives, and the computer science guy was like, If it's a clean cut, it's actually not that big of a deal.
That's awesome.
Like, it's at the end of the day, I mean, it's just a circuit board. Just put it back together, resolder it, fine.
Oh my gosh, dude. I love how you just know all that.
I just thought that part was funny because the computer guys, they're like, if you just slice it perfectly, it's not that big of a deal.
Would they have to worry about water damage from like the canals and everything?
They planned for that, I thought.
Because
as soon as it happened, that's why they needed to make sure that everyone was gone, because they had to like go in and collect all the stuff, and they didn't want it to be a firefight. All they wanted is to be able to go in quickly and get it before someone had enough time to destroy it.
Yeah, but I thought about like the boat falling apart into the Panama Canal.
It would still float though. They didn't have wires in the water, did they?
Yeah, they cut wires all the way through the boat, like underneath it, like it cut apart like butter, like and it split apart.
No. The reason they did that, is because it doesn't split apart. It stays together, but all the people die.
Well, the people die too. It does start. They describe it splitting in the book. Is that you started to see it like falling apart, like stacked like towers.
I don't know if I remember that.
Yeah.
Dang, because I thought in my mind it was so thin of a cut that basically the metal structure just remains intact. I think it lays on top of itself.
I feel like it does do that a little bit.
But it's also in water, which
is
so like
unstable. It has resistance in the water, and so that top would keep moving.
If there was resistance, though, then it wouldn't cut through people, because people would move. You'd just be pushed back.
You have to have some.
If it could push a whole boat, it could push a person.
No, but I'm saying the water, like, so if you have two different pieces now, if you stack blocks on top of each other and push them forward, the top blocks will fall off.
But let me mention something. Newton's laws state that objects at motion will remain in motion unless acted on by another party. So, another source. Another object? Another object. Another force.
But objects that are not in motion will not become in motion if they are not in motion in the first place.
But the boat is in motion.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
The boat will remain in motion.
Exactly.
So and so what keep going.
That's what I'm trying to say. That's what I'm trying to say. Because the water is going to resist it, slowing it down. There's always resistance from the water. So the top ones are going to want to continue being in motion, and so it would just collapse off the top. The bottom starts getting slowed down.
We need more physics.
We're turning into Mark Rober over here, but
we're basically Mark Rober. We're trying to figure out if the boat would fall apart.
I know. It totally. You'd have resistance from the bottom of the boat.
Yeah,
this is what I'm saying. Use blocks as an example. Like they're moving forward, you're getting resistance pushing back on the bottom ones, while the top ones keep moving forward. You have more resistance from water.
I hear what you're saying, but there's also the coefficient of friction to deal with, which on the actual boat between two layers, there's significant friction. Mm-hmm. They don't just slide.
If it's a clean cut, it could be like
even if it's a clean cut, that's a lot of weight. And that adds to the coefficient.
Well, I'm going to look it up at some point and figure it out. But I'm pretty sure they just fell apart. Like,
I'm going to have to look it up too. Or we could just watch the show.
I know.
See what they say.
Yeah, see what they do.
Okay,
they probably would do something dramatic.
If you've seen the show and you just endured the couple of minutes of us trying to figure it out, please let us know in the comments what happened. Actually, we've read the book. We know what happens. Tell us. Tell us whether it fell apart or whether it stayed together. Yep. We have to know.
Oh, man, I'm so excited. So excited to see that part in the show.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to watch it for.
For that moment.
Because there's a lot of creepy stuff in there, too. Yeah, you have to get through that.
And I think the show kind of is going more of a creepy vibe than even the book was.
It seems that way from the trailers, at least. We haven't seen the show yet.
Yeah, they really go hard on, like, all of the suicidal scientists in it, which the book mentions, but it doesn't really go into that, like, as much. Like, it's just kind of like all these people, like, are so freaked out that science isn't working, which comes from one of my other favorite part of the book is I love the two different analogies that they give of the shooters and the farmers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, where they're saying like, okay, the analogy is, or do we live? So if there was a person in the universe who's just shooting holes, a marksman in the universe, exactly a certain distance away from each other. And then some scientists were going to look at it and say like, oh, there's going to be a hole in the world, in the universe, exactly this far away from each other. Therefore, science, there's a pattern. And we don't necessarily like, that isn't really a matter of science, a law of nature. It's just that somebody else had caused that to happen. But we had declared it science because we found a pattern. Then the other one, which is the creepier example that they say in the book, is the farmers, where it's a bunch of turkeys who wake up every single morning and they get fed every single morning. And the scientist turkeys declare there is a scientific law that food will appear for us every single morning. And then Thanksgiving Day comes, and then I think food does or doesn't arrive, doesn't really matter, and they all get slaughtered. And so the whole idea is like, is it really a law of science, or is it that somebody is creating this that make it look like a pattern that we've just decided was a law of science, and we just got lucky over all these hundreds of years that this pattern is continuing. And it's kind of a creepy way to look at science and to think about it, because like that, honestly, that could happen with science, that could happen with laws. And
whether the patterns we see are natural patterns or if they're being caused by some other actor.
Yes, exactly. So very creepy vibe in the book, which I loved. It really makes you question everything, but it also makes you really more excited about science by the end of it. It's just really cool.
It's an exciting book to read because you get to discover those things and learn things you probably didn't know before, especially for the layman, just to go in and be like, whoa, all this physics stuff that I never knew before. It makes you excited about it.
For sure. You think about the world completely different because of all those things.
Absolutely.
It's amazing. So final rating of this book, Jaden, what would you give it?
I have this one squarely at an 8.4.
Okay. Wow. Pretty good. Why?
I really liked it. The reason it's not in the 7s, and it was a good book. Sci-fi is not my total favorite, but the reason I have it in the mid 8s, and that's pretty close to as high as you can get, so it's a pretty high rating, is because of the expansive, the physics, the science, the interesting questions. Brought it down a little bit because of like all the murdery stuff.
Yeah.
But I thought the physics questions, the science stuff, the game they played, all so cool. The computer easily gave it a couple extra decimal places for that.
You're like, that was amazing.
So yeah.
Yeah. I would probably give this one, I would probably give this an 8.5.
Wow.
Yeah.
Means our average is going to get weird.
Well, I was thinking to Goodreads, I'm like, if I give this as an 8 out of 10, that means a 4 stars out of 5. And I'm like,
don't think about stars. We don't do stars on this channel.
We don't do stars, but it rounds down, like 4 out of 5. And I'm like, it's not a 4-star book. Like, it's definitely closer to a 5-star book. And so that's why it lands like at an 8.5 for me. I liked this book a lot. And there was a lot of things that I learned. It expanded my mind. I felt like I learned a lot. And I was able to just get different perspectives on the world, politics, everything. Really enjoyable. But the biggest thing that brought it down for me is that there are parts of this book where it was hard for me to get back to this book. Like I would want to I gotta listen to a book. I'm like, I guess I'm listening to The 3-Body Problem. Then once I start listening to it, I'm like, oh, this is amazing. And like I would think that every single time. But every single time I stopped the book and went to like do like other things, I would have a hard time coming back.
Yeah.
And so I always worry when I recommend this book that they'll get to the end and that they'll be able to make it through all of those parts that I know is going to be a little bit slower and still have an enjoyable experience. Because I know that if they make it to the end, they're going to love the whole experience that they've had.
Oh, man. It's good.
Yeah, it's really good. So
if you've read it, we definitely want to hear your recommendations and ratings too. So on a scale of 1 to 10, decimal places included, how would you rate The 3-Body Problem if you've read it? If you haven't already, you made it through the entire spoilers section, you might as well subscribe to the channel because you just enjoy this content. So
yeah, it's great.
Join us.
Yeah, join us. We may be reviewing the TV show next.
Definitely will.
Yeah, so we gotta check it out and look for that. We're really excited about that, and we'd love to have you.
See you then.